Shana Tova. If I was to say the following famous opening lines from the following famous stories, what is it that comes to mind? Once upon a time, we're automatically transported to the world of fairy tales. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. We are aware we've stepped into Jane Austen's classic British novel, Pride and Prejudice. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. We're transported into the dystopian universe of George Orwell's 1984. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley of number 4 Privet Drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. We know we've opened the first book of the Harry Potter series. So, is it the vivid imagery, the creative prowess of the authors, or memories of curling up on the couch with these books in hand? And what about this most well-known line from our most well-known story of all? Breshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And we immediately know that we are at the start of our Torah. As Jews, we are collectively subscribed to the moniker people of the book, and the notion of story resonates deeply with us all. We are entrenched in a deep, rich literary tradition, from beautiful, complex biblical prose to the most caustic of all legal formulations in the Mishnah and Talmud. You could even say that we as Jews revere stories. 3 times a week, including Shabbat, plus on holidays, we take out from this splendid ark behind us a holy scroll, adorned in elaborate dressings from an embroidered, colorful, or on the High Holy Days white cover, to sparkling silver accoutrements. We then parade it around, we kiss it, we touch it, we bring it back up to this bima, where we read from these ancient words, black ink on white parchment, a section from our people's story. We even have a whole festival dedicated to storytelling, though not the one that we celebrate tonight. On Pesach, after all, we gather around the Seder table with our families and loved ones and spend an entire evening telling the story of our exodus from Egypt. The one true commandment of that night, from which all other commandments and rituals flow, is V'higadata levincha. You shall tell that story to your children. In fact, Rosh Hashanah, the auspicious festival for which we gather tonight, is framed through the image of a book. We learn in the Talmud that 3 books are opened on this day before the Holy One. One of holy wicked people, one of holy righteous people, and another of Benonim, that category of most of us humans who fall somewhere in the middle. Subsequently, we pray that B'Rosh Hashanah yikatevun, u'v'yom Som Kippur yechatemun. On Rosh Hashanah may you be inscribed, and on Yom Kippur may you be sealed in the book of life, that your story, our story, may continue. Equally, we greet one another, L'Shana Tova Tikatevu, wishing that our friends, our family, our neighbors, our fellow congregants, that they may be written in the book of life for this upcoming year, 5783. As Jewish educator Abraham Infeld points out in his book, A Passion for a People, Jewish civilization has always used stories, all the way back from the Torah, continuing through the Talmud, the Midrashim, and all the way to modern music and poetry, to tell and retell our collective narrative. However, let's take a step backwards. Every story needs a good beginning, right? After all, we knew those stories from earlier simply from their beginnings, their very first words. In broader terms, this might be considered what is known as an origin story. defined by Professor Jessica Silby from the University of Suffolk School of Law as a narrative that explains how a culture came into being, which, she continues, also literally give a culture life by designating a beginning and a history. She then explicitly names the book of Genesis, from which we take our Rosh Hashanah Torah readings, as an origin story. To categorize it further, though, we might imagine that we have a universal origin story and a particular Jewish origin story. Those famous first words of Genesis that Silby referred to, and which in fact act as an alternative Torah reading for tomorrow morning, fit that universal framework. In it, we read of God's creation of the universe, from separating night from day, separating the waters from the skies, breathing life into even the swarming creatures, to, of course, the formation of the first humans out of dust and out of rib bone. Finally, we are granted on the seventh day that most precious gift of Shabbat. However, in the grandeur of the narrative, we might have missed that there is no specific reference to Jews, either as individuals or as a people. Therefore, we might infer that this story is for all of God's beings, and created in the divine image, Vayar Elohim ki tov, God saw that it was all good. Which brings us to a Jewish origin story. To think about it another way, for Abraham Infeld, there is a group of core memories which the Jewish people identify with as defining our beginnings, purpose, and yes, history, as a people, and what form the spine of who we are. The first is many generations after Adam and Eve were exiled from the Garden of Eden, when Abraham separates himself from the idol-worshipping culture around him and proclaims, Ivri Anochi, I am a Hebrew. This distinction is found in the very root of the word Ivri, or Ever, which translates as on the other side, delineating Abraham and his descendants as distinguished from the rest of their society thereafter. The start of our story is, when we reflect on it, literally marked on the bodies of our baby boys each time we welcome one into the Jewish family, when we circumcise them just as Avraham Avinu beforehand. We make clear statements then, connecting ourselves to the first Hebrew family, past, present, and future, as we bring the baby into the covenant, the Brit of Avraham, our father. And then, of course, on Rosh Hashanah day 2, we find ourselves standing with this same Abraham on Har Moriah as we tell the story of the Akedah, the binding of his beloved son, Isaac. At the same time, we can also think back to another mountain, this time with Moses on Mount Sinai. The Midrash on Parashat Nitzavim, our parasha for Yom Kippur morning, later down the road, picks up on the verse, It is not with you alone that I make this oath, but also with future generations to come who were there at the same hour. Our rabbis debate the meaning of these words and interpret them to mean that all Jewish souls were standing there at Sinai too, even if their bodies were not yet physically present. In short, as the saying goes, I met you at Sinai. Infeld defines this as one of our core Jewish memories, one of our origin stories, and always cites it in his speeches, because according to him, it is at Sinai where we, as a people, entered into a covenant with God and defined who we are, what our dreams are, and the nature of our relationship with the eternal. In other words, it doesn't matter whether we were really there, because each of us was there anyways. To quote Infeld, Jews don't have history, we have memory. As we might put it, we have the story, and it is an inherent part of our very being. Talk about a powerful story. That being said, stories are powerful in different ways and for different reasons. Stories might firstly be powerful because they have the potential to challenge us. Whilst there are many challenging stories found within our biblical canon, one of the most prominent is that second day, Rosh Hashanah morning reading that we have alluded to, the Akedah. At its core, this very tale is a challenge, for it is God's ultimate pressure test to Abraham. Vadonai nisa et Avraham, and God tested Abraham. He is given a seemingly insurmountable challenge to take his beloved son to the top of Mount Moriah and sacrifice him. Who among us can imagine being charged with such an impossible task? It seems like our ancient rabbis were challenged by this text too. They delve relentlessly into the details of this story, trying to dot all the I's and cross all the T's as they fill in the blanks, trying to make sense out of this dramatically horrifying incident. For example, they try to determine how old Isaac was at the time, or why Isaac is referred to as Abraham's only son, when Abraham also has another son, Ishmael. So why might we think that the Akedah is so challenging? At its core, it is perhaps because if the situation had played out and the angel not grabbed Abraham's wrist to stop him from stabbing his son, the first Hebrew, our forefather, would literally have killed off his future, with no other child who would perpetuate his legacy, his lineage, his values, his beliefs, his roots. In short, his story. On the other hand, stories also become powerful in their ability to inspire us. Their purpose, as the late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks has stated, is not, or not just, to make us feel good or provide us with entertainment. With the Akedah being an exemplary case study in the parent-child relationship, we can reflect on the effect of embedding the Jewish story on our children, with Rabbi Sacks writing. It enables children to say, "This is the story of which I am a part. These are the people who came before me and whose descendant I am. These are the roots of which I am the stem and reaching up toward the sun." Put differently, the stories we tell provide us with inspiration through their prescriptions for future actions and interactions with the world around us. Our High Holy Days liturgy, after all, seeks to inspire us towards bettering ourselves and also the world around us. It is from the Akedah story that we derive the tradition of blowing the shofar, first during each day of the month of Elul, leading up to this sacred time, and then during our High Holy Days services, not in the evenings, culminating in that resounding Tikiyah Gedolah that closes out Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur. Those piercing blasts are, according to the medieval philosopher Maimonides, a call to action, as he states, "Awake, you slumberers, from your sleep, and rouse yourself from your lethargy. Look to your souls, mend your ways and actions. Seek the way of Adonai." In other words, our consciences are stirred towards a deeper meaning to our lives, to the greater good, and to a greater connection with God and everything around us. Finally, but maybe most importantly, the power of stories is in their potential to connect us to one another. At this moment, let's paint a picture of what is happening for all Jews all around the world. Millions of us are, or will be, or if you are like me, Australian, and your family is already in Rosh Hashanah, sitting in synagogue, listening to the same liturgy, singing the same melodies, and chanting the same Torah readings as our ancestors did, hundreds, if not thousands, of years ago. We feel a pull in our hearts, a certain indescribable nostalgia even, not necessarily from the history of how those prayers were written or how the music was composed, but rather because of the memories we associate with them. From sitting on our grandparents' laps as children to our own grandchildren perhaps sitting on ours, as we endeavor to pass that shared story midor ledor, from generation to generation. Within our Holy Blossom community, let's look at a specific story which connects all of us, that usually sits right in front of our seats, Siddur Pirkei Kodesh. An interesting feature that you might notice if you take the chance to leaf through its gorgeous pages is that it is prefaced with a small slice of history, to be sure, to place it in the context of the many other Siddurim that have graced our shelves beforehand. Overwhelmingly, however, it tells the story of creating this Siddur with its unique qualities and messages. We can see this in Rabbi Moskowitz's letter about why the new prayer book was essential, to Rabbi Splansky's introduction about what this Siddur is intended to say about our congregation, such as that we are intellectually curious and that we aspire to balance tradition and modernity. Even more so, the very first section of our Siddur is a litany of opening meditations before worship, with many prompts and poems and quotes from sages both ancient and closer to our time, seeking to ignite the heart and stir the soul before our voices join in harmony to pray. It is only the last of the 7 stated purposes for creating the Siddur that says to celebrate Holy Blossom Temple's rich history. Indeed, it is the very last section of the Siddur as a whole that offers us a brief glimpse of Holy Blossom's illustrious first 150 years, from its establishment as Toronto's first synagogue in 1856 to its adoption of the name Pirkei Kodesh, Holy Blossom, in 1871, to its various relocations around the city until we eventually settled right here on Bathurst Street in the 1930s. Subsequently, in moving into this role as one of your rabbis, I'm learning something valuable, that there is no history without story. I have personally been so challenged and inspired by and connected to you all in learning your stories over these last few short months, whether you've been members for 5 generations, 2 generations, or joined in just the last year. It is each and every one of these stories which contribute and which are essential to the rich tapestry of a vibrant, dynamic community. With this power of story in our hearts and minds, I urge you to ask yourselves, in line, spoiler alert, with our strategic plan to be unveiled later this calendar year, the following question: what is your Holy Blossom story? And then share it. Share it with yourself, that you know it well and can consider the ways in which you feel attached to this place and its people, and how you might wish to build us up better than ever. Share it with a friend or neighbor, that you may meet someone new and unexpected, or maybe someone who you haven't spent time with in too long, that they may be inspired or challenged to join themselves to our fate. Share it with us too, that we may get to learn more about you. It is our pleasure. Finally, it is written on this occasion of Rosh Hashanah that today, Hayom Harat Ha'olam, today is the birthday of the world. What will this new lap around the sun, this new opportunity, this new chapter of the story look like to you? How will you be challenged or inspired or connected? Let us reach this year towards the sun. Shana Tova.